He walked into the Senate, not as a man, but as a storm in human form. His robe wasn't louder than yours. His steps didn't echo harder. But when Julius Caesar entered, the room changed. No words, just his presence. The men who plotted his downfall, those with daggers hidden beneath their togas, watched him. And still they waited. They feared the wrong move, the wrong expression. Because even then, Caesar didn't need to speak to dominate. He had learned something most never do. The most commanding voice in the world is the one that knows when to stay silent. We live in an era drowning in noise. Everyone wants to be heard, noticed, validated. They talk to fill the silence, hoping that more words will somehow equal more authority. But Caesar knew the opposite was true. He didn't just say things. He made every word feel like it cost him something to speak. And when a man speaks like that, you listen. Because silence isn't weakness, it's weight. In his youth, Caesar wasn't known for being loud. He didn't demand respect through volume or flash. In fact, some underestimated him until it was too late. But even then, he had a rule he lived by. Never compete in the arena of noise. Rule through contrast. When senators ranted in public forums, Caesar waited. When others argued, he paused. And when he finally spoke, he cut through the air like a blade. His restraint wasn't passivity, it was control. You see, the world respects a man who doesn't need to prove himself. And silence says one thing louder than any speech. I already know who I am. Let's be honest. Most people overshare, overexplain, overtalk. Why? Because they're insecure about being misunderstood. Or worse, ignored. So they try to fill the silence before anyone else does. But in doing so, they give away their power. Caesar's power came from intentional mystery. People feared what they couldn't read more than what they heard. The man who doesn't explain himself becomes dangerous. Because you can't anticipate what you don't understand. Presence isn't about being loud. It's about how much space you command without asking. And Caesar was a master of this. He would hold eye contact just a second longer than comfortable. He would stay silent in meetings until others tripped over their own words. And when he did speak, his voice didn't rise, it lowered. He didn't raise his tone to be heard. He made the room quiet itself. That's the kind of presence that doesn't just impress, it intimidates. And it's no accident, it's a tactic, one rooted in deep psychological warfare. Try this today. Before you respond to someone, pause for 3 seconds. That moment of stillness before you speak signals control because you're not reactive. You're deliberate. It builds anticipation so they'll lean in, not away. And it increases impact as your words feel chosen, rare, important. This is how Caesar built gravity around himself. He didn't make himself scarce. He made his words scarce. Caesar understood something leaders and influencers today forget. It's not what you say, it's how certainly you say it. He never begged to be understood. He declared and left the rest unsaid. This isn't arrogance, it's architecture. You're building a perception of certainty, of mastery, of destiny. The moment you start justifying yourself, apologizing, over-explaining, you bleed authority. One of Caesar's most feared tactics wasn't violence, it was silence. When rivals challenged him publicly, he often didn't respond. When enemies accused him in the Senate, he smiled and walked away. It made them furious because they couldn't pull him into their noise. And what you don't respond to, you rise above. Silence made Caesar unpredictable. It made him untouchable. Because he wasn't fighting them, he was playing an entirely different game. Let others speak first. Let them reveal their hand. Let them try to dominate the room through noise. And then say one sentence that changes the entire conversation. Because when you speak with Caesar's discipline, you're not just being quiet. You're turning silence into strategy. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he didn't announce it with a proclamation. He didn't deliver a grand speech to his soldiers. He said just 3 words. Alea jacta est. The die is cast. No debate, no committee, just a decision. Spoken with fatal certainty. That moment ignited a civil war. Not because of what he said, but because he said just enough. That is the essence of Julius Caesar's power. Minimal words, maximum consequence. You know who speaks endlessly? People who don't feel heard, people who need approval. But Caesar's mind was shaped by warfare, betrayal, and ambition. He knew the truth. He who speaks least is assumed to know the most. It's a paradox. Those who hold their tongue are seen as deeper, more calculating, more dangerous. Because power is felt, not explained. And nothing feels like power more than someone who's always holding something back. Even in moments of extreme pressure, Caesar kept his emotions behind a mask. When his daughter Julia died, tying him to his political rival Pompey, he grieved privately, then returned to the Senate, unreadable. When he was accused of tyranny, he didn't defend himself. He smiled. When he was offered the crown 3 times in public, he refused it carefully, knowing the people weren't ready. Not yet. He showed emotion only when it served his agenda, because every emotion displayed is a card revealed. And Caesar never showed his full hand. Julius mastered a social tactic most modern people fail at entirely. He made others speak first. In negotiations, confrontations, or social maneuvering, he simply let silence stretch. Most people can't stand silence. It triggers discomfort, so they rush to fill it. That's when they reveal their motives, their insecurities, their fears. Caesar used this as a weapon. The more you speak, the more predictable you become. But when he spoke, it was to direct, not react. And that's how he made even his enemies dance to his rhythm. A presence like Caesar's didn't need to overpower the room. He redirected the energy of the room. He would enter, observe who wanted to impress him, who avoided eye contact, who tried to dominate, and he'd say nothing. Instead, he'd change posture, move deliberately, place a hand on a shoulder, pause behind someone long enough for their breath to quicken. These micro-movements held more power than shouting ever could, because those who control their body control the room. Presence starts with posture. Consider these techniques for commanding a room without speaking. Enter second, not first. Let others arrive, settle, and then enter with intent. This makes you instantly noticeable. Say nothing for the first 30 seconds. Observe. Let others reveal themselves. Wait for someone to try to dominate the space, then take it back with one precise sentence. Move deliberately, never rushed. Power moves slowly. Caesar's walk was neither fast nor lazy. It was measured, as if time obeyed him. Hold eye contact, then break it strategically. Don't just stare. Use eye contact to challenge, and then break it to assert dominance. You're not desperate to connect. You allow connection. Lower your voice when you speak. Lower tones are processed as authority by the brain. Caesar's voice didn't demand attention. It commanded it. Today's world celebrates transparency and over-communication, but Caesar would laugh at that. He knew that the man who reveals all becomes irrelevant, because if you can be understood too easily, you can be dismissed just as fast. Mystery is magnetic. Your value doesn't lie in how much you share. It lies in how rarely you give the world access to your mind. And when you do, you drop a line that echoes for decades. Let's go back to the crown. Caesar was offered the crown in front of the Roman people 3 times, and each time he refused it. Not because he didn't want it, but because he was studying them, reading the crowd, gauging how much more they needed to admire him before they begged him to rule. Each refusal made him seem more noble, more self-controlled, and eventually, it made the people want what he had initially pretended not to. That's the brilliance of Caesar's restraint. Sometimes, power isn't taken. It's offered because you made them think it was their idea. Every time you speak, you're making a decision. Are you creating gravity, or are you draining your influence? Julius Caesar didn't fear silence. He shaped it into a weapon. Because in the end, the man who speaks the least is often the man they fear the most. Julius Caesar didn't just command soldiers. He commanded narratives. Every room he entered, every silence he held, every sentence he spoke was a calculated act of psychological warfare. Because Caesar understood one brutal truth about people. They don't follow the loudest voice. They follow the most certain one. Not the smartest, not the kindest, not even the most logical. They follow certainty because most people have none. And Caesar embodied certainty so convincingly, even when others knew he was wrong, they still followed. You think confidence is something you feel? No. Confidence is something you display. Caesar didn't always know how a battle would end, but when he rode to war, he never showed hesitation. His soldiers believed in his victory because he believed in it first. And when he made a move in the Senate, like reforming the calendar or bypassing tradition, he never proposed. He declared. He didn't wait for approval. He spoke as if his decisions were already history. That's how you bend people to your will, by acting like fate already agrees with you. Most people try to win others over. They use phrases like, "I hope that makes sense. Do you agree? Just my opinion, but..." Caesar never asked for agreement. He didn't care if you liked his choices. He didn't seek consensus. He created momentum. Because the moment you look for approval, you create doubt. Doubt invites questions. Certainty closes mouths. Julius had a strategy for ending conversations, arguments, and debates. He didn't. He simply said something so final, so confidently framed, that continuing the dialogue felt pointless, and then he left. It created an illusion of closure, one where he always had the last word, even if he said the least. That's why, even today, his quotes are remembered as if they were prophecies. I came, I saw, I conquered. The die is cast. It is not these well-fed, long-haired men that I fear, but the pale and the hungry-looking. Not long, not poetic, just undeniable. That's the kind of language that lasts for centuries. The next time you're in a discussion, don't rush to speak. Pause, not to stall, but to charge your next words with weight. In that moment, their brain anticipates importance. Their heart rate rises. Their eyes stay locked on you. Now, when you finally speak, you've already won. Because presence isn't just about being heard. It's about becoming the center of gravity in the room. And gravity doesn't shout. Caesar never tried to dominate every conversation. That wasn't his style. He let others chatter, debate, politic. And then, when the dust settled, he'd drop one sentence that rewrote the entire story. The secret is, you don't need to win every exchange. You just need to own the final impression. Let them talk, let them rant, let them try to be clever. Then pause and say the one thing no one else had the clarity or courage to say. That's not conversation. That's domination. Here's the irony. Everyone in Rome knew Caesar was ambitious. They knew he was rising too fast, collecting too much power. And yet, no one moved against him until it was too late. Why? Because he didn't force anything. He moved slowly, silently, predictably, and then suddenly acted with terrifying speed. This combination broke his enemies' minds. They were lulled by his calm, then shattered by his certainty. He spoke softly for years until his silence exploded into empire. Use this pause strike technique in any high-stakes situation like negotiation, confrontation, or even social dynamics. Observe the chaos. Let others fill the room with noise. Go quiet. Withdraw your energy. Let your presence speak louder than your words. Wait for tension. People fear silence more than criticism. Deliver your line. Make it precise, calm, and irreversible. Exit. Let your words echo behind you. This is Caesar's genius compressed into a single moment. You don't need to outtalk your rivals. Just outtime them. Words are like coins. The more you spend them, the less they're worth. Caesar understood this. That's why his silence had value. His stillness had tension, and his few words carried the weight of empires. Because in the end, he who controls his voice controls the world around him. There's a moment in every rise to power where noise becomes your enemy. The louder the world gets, the more people think they need to shout to be noticed. But Julius Caesar did the opposite. When the Senate grew restless, when Pompey tried to outmaneuver him, when conspirators whispered in corners, Caesar did not rush to respond. He slowed down. He let the silence do the sorting. And then, when the moment came, he struck, not with a speech, but with action. Because Caesar believed in this brutal rule. Let the world talk. You move. People think presence is about being yourself or owning your space. That's romantic nonsense. Caesar didn't own space. He constructed it, like an architect designs a palace. Every glance, every gesture, every calculated pause was designed to make people feel something they couldn't explain. Some called it charisma, others called it destiny, but it was neither. It was deliberate tension, the kind you create when you understand the deepest truth of all. People don't fear what they can see. They fear what they can't predict. That's why Caesar rarely said what he truly thought. He was always one step removed, just enough for others to doubt their read on him. This gave him space. It gave him control. And it let him become a mirror. People projected onto Caesar what they wanted to see. To the army, he was a fearless general. To the poor, a man of the people. To the Senate, a necessary evil. To the world, a symbol of Rome itself. Because he never pinned himself down with too many words. He let others define him, and then used that against them. If you take nothing else from Caesar, take this. He didn't speak to connect. He spoke to steer. Even when addressing his men, he wasn't trying to bond. He was programming them, loading their minds with belief, confidence, purpose. And the secret weapon behind his control? He withheld. He didn't explain his plans. He didn't soothe doubts. He let uncertainty harden into loyalty because his calm gave them courage. And when you can make people feel certain without giving them certainty, you control their minds. Most people will never command a room because they want to be liked. And Caesar didn't care about being liked. He cared about being followed. That's the hard truth. He didn't soften his edges to fit in. He made the room shape itself around him. He moved slower, spoke less, held his posture when others collapsed into nervous gestures. People stared at him not because he begged for attention, but because he trained them to feel like every second he gave was a gift. That's not presence. That's domination in disguise. There's one last element of his presence, and it's the most overlooked: distance. Caesar never let anyone get too close. Even his friends were kept at the edge of trust. His lovers were controlled by affection, but not allowed emotional leverage. His allies were watched more closely than his enemies, because he knew the closer someone gets to your truth, the more they learn how to control you. Distance makes your image mythic, and a myth commands far more loyalty than a man ever could. These are not ancient relics. These are timeless psychological principles. Speak rarely. Let your silence create tension. Move with purpose. Never rush. Every motion should say, "I have time because I control time." Choose mystery over oversharing. People fill the gaps in your silence with their own fear or fantasy. Create gravity. Speak last. Pause first. And always leave before the conversation loses momentum. Let your actions echo louder than your words. When others are still talking, you've already reshaped the game. Caesar didn't conquer Rome through speeches. He conquered it by becoming someone whose mere presence was a decision. You didn't just listen to him. You adjusted yourself around him. That's what it means to speak less and command more. Because in the end, words are wind, presence is weight. And Caesar was a storm in stone.